For almost 2 years, every Thursday at exactly 6:10 p.m., my husband kissed me on the forehead, picked up the same dark jacket and said, "I'm heading over to see Owen." And for almost 2 years, I loved him a little more every time he walked out that door. Our son had been struggling. His career had stalled, his engagement had ended, and he had moved into a small apartment across town because he said he needed to rebuild his life without anyone rescuing him. So when my husband started having dinner with him every Thursday, I thought it was the kindest thing a father could do. I never questioned why he came home late. I never questioned why he sometimes showered before bed. I never questioned why he stopped letting me wash the shirt he wore on Thursdays. I thought he was protecting our son's privacy. Then one Tuesday afternoon, I was sitting across from Owen at a coffee shop when I smiled and said, "I'm glad your dad has those Thursday dinners with you. I think helping you has given him something meaningful to look forward to." Owen stopped stirring his coffee. His face changed. "Mom," he said slowly, "what Thursday dinners?" I laughed because I thought he was joking. He wasn't. Then he said the sentence that divided my marriage into everything before that moment and everything after it. "Dad hasn't been to my apartment in almost 8 months. And suddenly I had only one question. If my husband wasn't spending Thursdays with our son, where had he been going for the last 2 years? My name is Meredith Langford. I was 54 years old when I discovered that admiration could be more dangerous than suspicion. Suspicion makes you look closely. Admiration makes you stop looking altogether. My husband, Grant, and I had been married for 29 years. We weren't one of those couples who constantly announced how happy we were. We had disagreements. We got irritated with each other. We had gone through stretches when work, bills, family responsibilities, and exhaustion made us feel more like partners running a household than two people who had once stayed awake until 2 in the morning, because neither wanted to end a conversation. But I trusted him. Completely. Grant was 57, calm, organized, dependable, and almost painfully predictable. He worked as an operations manager for a commercial building company. He left home at 7:15 every morning. He called me most afternoons. He bought groceries from the same store. He kept receipts folded neatly in his wallet. If Grant said he would be somewhere at 7, he arrived at 6:55. That reliability was one of the reasons I had fallen in love with him. Our only child, Owen, was 28. The previous year had been brutal for him. He had been working for a small technology company that collapsed unexpectedly. A few months later, his fiancée, Natalie, ended their engagement. Owen never gave us the full details. He simply told us they had wanted different lives. After that, he became quieter. He stopped coming over every weekend. He stopped answering some of my calls. When I worried, Grant always told me the same thing. "Give him room, Meredith. He needs to know he can stand on his own." Then, almost 2 years before that afternoon in the coffee shop, Grant announced that he was going to start seeing Owen every Thursday. "Nothing serious," he told me. "Dinner. Maybe help him with a few things." I remember smiling. "That's exactly what he needs." Grant shrugged. "He needs his father without feeling like his father is checking on him." That sentence stayed with me. I thought it was wise. I repeated it to friends. I even defended Grant when Owen occasionally complained that his father could be emotionally distant. "You don't see everything he does for you," I told my son once. Those words would eventually become one of my deepest regrets. Because Owen was right. He didn't see what Grant did on Thursdays. Neither did I. The routine became almost sacred. Thursday morning, Grant would usually ask what I was doing that evening. Around 5:30, he would change clothes. Not formally. Usually dark pants, a button-down shirt, and his charcoal jacket. At 6, he would check his phone. At 6:10, almost exactly, he would leave. "Tell Owen I love him," I would say. Always. Sometimes I packed leftovers for them. Grant would take the container and return it empty. Sometimes I asked what they had eaten. Burgers. Chinese. Pasta. Nothing elaborate. Nothing memorable enough to invite questions. Occasionally I asked how Owen was doing. Grant's answers were always vague. "He's getting there. He's figuring things out. He doesn't want us worrying." I interpreted the vagueness as loyalty. I thought Grant was keeping private conversations between father and son confidential. There was something else I noticed. After a few months, Grant became protective of Thursdays. If I suggested dinner with friends, he declined. If someone invited us somewhere, he would ask whether we could choose another night. Once my sister invited us to a small family gathering on a Thursday. Grant immediately said he couldn't go. I remember teasing him. Owen gets priority over everyone now? Grant smiled. Right now, maybe he should. How could I argue with that? I admired him. That was the brilliance of the lie. Grant didn't hide his Thursdays behind overtime, traffic, or business meetings. He hid them behind fatherhood. And because I loved our son, questioning Grant would have felt like questioning the very thing I wanted to believe about him. The Tuesday everything changed began normally. Owen had called and asked whether I wanted coffee. That alone surprised me. For months, I had been the one initiating most of our conversations. We met at a quiet place near his apartment. He looked better than he had in a long time. He had started freelance consulting and was considering joining a new company. We talked about work. We talked about his apartment. We talked about whether he was ready to date again. Then I said something I had wanted to tell him for months. You know, I'm proud of the way you and your father have gotten closer. Owen frowned. What do you mean? The Thursdays. He stared at me. I smiled. Your dinners. His spoon stopped halfway around his cup. What dinners? I laughed. Owen. I'm serious. My smile disappeared. Your dad comes over every Thursday. No, he doesn't. For a moment, I actually wondered whether my son was embarrassed to admit how much help he had needed. Your father has been doing this for almost 2 years. Owen leaned back. Mom, Dad came over a few times when I first moved in. I waited. That was it. How many times? I don't know. 4? 5. My hand suddenly felt cold. But he goes every Thursday. Not here. I studied my son's face, searching for something that would make his words less frightening. Confusion. Embarrassment. A joke. Anything. There was nothing. When did you last see him here? Owen thought about it. Maybe 8 months ago. I shook my head. No. Mom. No. He was with you last Thursday. Owen's expression hardened. I worked until almost 9 last Thursday. That was when the room seemed to become strangely quiet. People were still talking around us. Machines were still running behind the counter. But I heard none of it. I remembered Grant coming home at 10:17 that night. I remembered asking whether Owen seemed better. I remembered Grant answering, much. And I remembered feeling grateful. Owen leaned toward me. Mom, where does Dad say he goes? I looked at him. To you. Owen wanted to confront him immediately. I didn't. Not yet. I needed to understand what I was confronting. Maybe Grant was helping someone else. Maybe Owen had misunderstood. Maybe there was some explanation so ordinary that we would eventually laugh at how frightened I had been. Those were the excuses my mind created during the drive home. Then I walked into our bedroom and opened Grant's closet. I don't know what I expected to find. A receipt. A note. Something obvious. There was nothing. Grant came home at 5:40. I was in the kitchen. He kissed my cheek. How was your day? Fine. I forced myself to behave normally. We ate dinner. We watched television. I barely heard a word. At 9:30, Grant went upstairs. His phone remained on the side table. I stared at it. I had never searched my husband's phone. Not once in 29 years. Picked it up. It required his passcode. The passcode had changed. For years it had been the same 4 digits. Now it wasn't. I put the phone down. That tiny detail frightened me more than I expected. The next morning I asked casually, "How's Owen doing?" Grant poured coffee. Better. Really? Yeah. Did he say anything interesting Thursday? Grant barely hesitated. He's thinking about changing jobs. That was true. But Owen had told me he hadn't discussed it with his father. Anything else? Grant looked at me. Why? No reason. He smiled. He'll be okay. Then he left for work. And I stood in the kitchen realizing that Grant hadn't merely allowed me to misunderstand. He was actively maintaining the lie. I had 2 days. Wednesday was unbearable. I considered following Grant. Then I felt ashamed. 29 years of marriage, and I was planning to follow my husband like a stranger. But by Thursday afternoon, shame had been replaced by determination. At 5:32, Grant went upstairs. At 5:48, he came down wearing the charcoal jacket. 6, he checked his phone. At 6:09, he picked up his keys. I'm heading to Owen's. There it was. The lie. Direct. Effortless. I looked into the face of the man I had slept beside for nearly 3 decades. Tell him I love him. Always. He kissed my forehead. Then he walked out. I waited 4 minutes. Then I followed. Grant drove across town. For the first 15 minutes the route made sense. Owen lived west of us. Then Grant turned south. I tightened my hands around the steering wheel. Maybe he was picking up food. Then he passed the road that would have taken him toward Owen's neighborhood. 10 minutes later, he entered an older residential area filled with restored homes and large trees. He slowed. Then he pulled into a driveway. I drove past. I only saw the house for 3 seconds. But 3 seconds was enough. Because I knew it. I had been inside it before. And I knew the woman who owned it. Her name was Celeste Warren. She had once been my closest friend. Celeste and I met when we were 26. We worked together briefly and became close almost immediately. She was confident where I was cautious. Social where I was reserved. For years she was part of our lives. She came to birthdays. She attended Owen's graduation. She knew our family stories. She knew our arguments. She knew the parts of my marriage I never discussed with anyone else. Then, about 4 years earlier, our friendship faded. There was no dramatic fight. Celeste became busy caring for her mother. I changed jobs. Calls became texts. Texts became occasional messages. Eventually, we simply stopped reaching out. At least that was what I believed. But Grant was sitting in her driveway. On Thursday. The same Thursday he claimed he was spending with our son. I parked around the corner. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I wanted to walk to the front door. Instead I waited. At 7:03 the front curtain shifted. At 7:41, I saw Grant's silhouette cross the room. At 8:20 Celeste stepped outside carrying a small bag to the trash. She looked older than I remembered. Then she went back inside. Grant didn't leave. 9 o'clock. 9:30. 10. At 10:06 his car backed out of the driveway. I drove home using another route. He arrived 12 minutes after I did. I was sitting on the sofa. How's Owen? I asked. Grant removed his jacket. Tired. Did you eat? Yeah. What did you have? He looked toward the kitchen. Takeout. What kind? That finally made him pause. Why the interrogation? I smiled. No interrogation. I'm hungry. Thai. Then he went upstairs. I sat there alone. Celeste hated Thai food. I remembered that. Grant didn't. I barely slept. My mind wanted to label what I had seen. An affair. That was the obvious answer. But something bothered me. Grant hadn't behaved like a man sneaking into a secret relationship. He had driven directly into Celeste's driveway. He had parked where neighbors could see him. This had been happening for almost 2 years. Why Thursday? Why such consistency? And why use Owen? The next morning I called my son. I followed him. Silence. Where? Celeste Warren's house. Owen remembered her immediately. Aunt Celeste. We had called her that when he was young. Yes. Another silence. Then Owen said, Mom, I need to tell you something. My stomach tightened. What? Her name has come up recently. How? Owen hesitated. Dad asked me for something a few months ago. What? Old files. What files? When I moved, you gave me those storage boxes from the basement. I remembered. They contained old family paperwork, photographs, school records, receipts, and outdated computer equipment. Dad asked whether I still had the old external hard drive. I stood up. What hard drive? The silver one. I knew exactly which one he meant. Years earlier, Grant had used it to back up household records. Why did he want it? He said there might be some old company files on it. Did you give it to him? No. I couldn't find it. I felt strangely relieved. Then Owen continued. But I found it last month. My relief disappeared. Do you still have it? Yeah. Don't give it to him. Mom, what's happening? I don't know yet. That was the truth. But for the first time I understood something important. Whatever was happening on Thursdays might have begun years before the Thursdays themselves. Owen brought the hard drive to my house Saturday morning. Grant had gone to help a coworker move some equipment. The drive was nearly 12 years old. Owen connected it to his laptop. There were hundreds of folders. Tax documents. Photographs. Old work files. Household budgets. Then Owen found a folder labeled simply CW. Celeste Warren. My stomach dropped. Open it. Inside were scanned documents, spreadsheets, photographs, and saved emails. Most were more than 10 years old. Owen opened one. It was a financial spreadsheet. Grant's name appeared at the top. Celeste's appeared beneath it. Then I saw an address. Not Celeste's current house. A small rental property on the north side of town. I recognized it. Years earlier, Celeste had briefly owned it. I remembered helping her choose curtains. What is this? Owen asked. I don't know. Then he opened another document. It was an agreement. Not romantic. Financial. Grant had loaned Celeste money. A lot of money. Without telling me. And according to the date, he had done it 18 years earlier. I stared at the number. $48,000. At that time, Grant and I had been saving for Owen's education. We had argued constantly because Grant claimed our finances were too tight. I had taken extra work. I had delayed replacing my car. I had canceled a family trip. And while I was doing all of that, my husband had secretly transferred nearly $50,000 to my best friend. But that still wasn't the worst document on the drive. The worst one was a scanned letter from Celeste. It began with 5 words. Grant, Meredith can never know. I couldn't finish reading it the first time. Owen did. Then he closed the laptop. Mom. Open it again. You don't have to. Open it. He did. The letter was not a love letter. In some ways that made it worse. Celeste wrote about a business investment she and Grant had made together. She had found an opportunity to purchase and renovate 2 rental properties. Grant had secretly provided the money. They planned to split the profits. Grant apparently believed it would be a quick investment. Instead, the project failed. One property developed major structural problems. The other sat vacant. Most of the money disappeared. Grant never told me. Celeste never told me. My best friend and my husband had entered a secret financial partnership behind my back. Then I reached the final paragraph. Celeste wrote, if Meredith finds out we did this after she specifically told you she wasn't comfortable investing our savings, she'll know you used money she thought was still in your joint account. I'll repay everything. Until then, she can never know. Our savings. Not Grant's. Ours. I remembered that period clearly. Grant had told me an investment account had lost value because of the market. I believed him. I had comforted him. I had told him money could be rebuilt. He had let me reassure him about a loss he had deliberately caused. I closed my eyes. Owen looked sick. I'm sorry. I shook my head. You didn't do anything. Why would Dad keep these files? That was the question. If this secret was 18 years old, why was Grant visiting Celeste now? We kept searching. Then Owen found another folder. This one had been created only 14 months earlier. Inside was a document with a title that made both of us go silent. Repayment schedule. Celeste had apparently begun repaying Grant. Not 18 years ago. Recently. The payment started 21 months earlier. Almost exactly when the Thursday dinners began. Every month Celeste transferred money into an account I had never seen. 2,000. Sometimes 3. Once 5,000. Owen added the numbers. More than $60,000 had already been transferred. Where is this money? I whispered. Owen shook his head. I knew our accounts. Least I thought I did. That money wasn't there. Then Owen noticed something. Each payment had a reference code. He searched the drive. Another document appeared. It was an account statement. The account belonged to Grant. Only Grant. There were withdrawals too. Large ones. Some transferred elsewhere. Some listed as cashier's checks. Then we found a name. Not Celeste. Not Grant. Not mine. Evelyn Warren. I looked at Owen. That's Celeste's daughter. Owen frowned. I thought she didn't have kids. She does. I hadn't seen Evelyn since she was a teenager. Celeste had sent her to live with relatives after a difficult period in their relationship. Years later, I heard Evelyn had moved out of state. Why was my husband sending money to her? And why was Celeste repaying him at the same time? Owen leaned back. This is bigger than an affair. I looked at the screen. Yes, but I still didn't know how much bigger. I called Celeste Monday morning. She answered on the fourth ring. Meredith. Hearing her voice after years of distance made my chest tighten. Hi, Celeste. Wow. It's been forever. Her surprise sounded genuine. That confused me. Yes. How are you? Fine. We exchanged meaningless words for almost a minute. Then I said, I was thinking about coming by Thursday evening. Silence. Not long. Maybe 2 seconds. But long enough. Thursday. Yes. I'm actually busy Thursday. With Grant. Nothing. I heard her breathing. Then she said, Meredith, where are you? At home. Is Grant there? No. Another pause. Then her voice changed completely. Don't confront him yet. My hand tightened around the phone. So he has been coming to your house? Yes. For how long? Meredith. How long? Almost 2 years. I closed my eyes. Are you sleeping with my husband? No. The answer came instantly. I believed her. Not because I trusted her. Because there was fear in her voice, not guilt of that kind. Then what are you doing? Celeste lowered her voice. Trying to fix something we should have told you about years ago. I know about the investment. Silence. You know. I found the files. She exhaled. Then you know I've been repaying him. Yes. That isn't why he comes here. My heart began beating faster. Then why? Celeste said something I never expected. He comes here because he thinks I still have the original documents. What documents? The ones proving what he did after the investment failed. Celeste asked me to meet her the following morning. Not at her house. At a public park. I arrived first. She appeared 10 minutes later carrying a folder. For a moment, neither of us knew how to greet each other. Once I would have hugged her. Now I barely recognized the person standing in front of me. We sat on a bench. Celeste placed the folder between us. I owe you an apology that's almost 20 years late. I don't need an apology yet. I need the truth. She nodded. The investment was my idea. I know. Grant agreed without telling you. I know that too. When it failed, I promised to repay him. So why wait 18 years? Celeste looked down. Because Grant told me not to. That made no sense. Why? Because the money he gave me wasn't taken from the account you thought. I stared at her. What does that mean? Celeste opened the folder. Inside were copies of old bank records. Grant had not simply withdrawn our savings. He had taken a loan. A loan secured against something I owned jointly with him. Our first house. The home where we had raised Owen. Grant had forged my authorization. My name was on the paperwork. My signature was not mine. I stared at it until the letters blurred. He forged this. Celeste nodded. I didn't know until the project collapsed. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was scared. And because Grant convinced me he could repair everything before you found out. My voice shook. And you let him? Yes. The honesty hurt. Then she continued. He refinanced. Moved money around. Covered the original loan. Eventually the paperwork disappeared into later transactions. And now I'm selling my house. I looked at her. What? I decided last year to repay everything I owed. With interest. The monthly payments. Yes. Why does Grant keep coming every Thursday? Celeste looked directly at me. Because I told him I had copies of the original loan documents. And he wants them destroyed. I asked the question that had been tormenting me. Why every Thursday? Celeste gave me an exhausted look. Because that's when my financial advisor used to come. Used to. For the first few months. Grant wanted to control how the repayments were documented. So he came here every week? At first. And after that? Celeste hesitated. Then things changed. How? I told Grant the repayments weren't going directly to him anymore. My stomach tightened. Where were they going? To Evelyn. Why? Celeste looked away. Because I found out what Grant had been doing with the money. The payments I had seen going to Evelyn were not Grant supporting her. Celeste had structured the repayments so part of the money went to her daughter. But why? Then Celeste explained. Years earlier, when the failed properties were finally sold, there had been a small insurance settlement connected to one of them. Grant handled the paperwork. Celeste believed the settlement had gone toward the debt. It hadn't. Grant had kept it. And the settlement had partly belonged to Celeste. More importantly, some of the money was supposed to have been placed in an account for Evelyn. Grant never did it. Celeste discovered this only 2 years earlier while reviewing old records. That was why she contacted him. That was why Thursdays began. She demanded repayment. Grant demanded silence. And somehow my son became his perfect excuse. I felt nauseated. Grant had turned Owen's hardest period into camouflage. While I believed my husband was helping our struggling son rebuild his life, he was sitting in Celeste's house trying to contain an 18-year-old financial betrayal. I told Celeste about the hard drive. Her eyes widened. The silver one? Yes. She almost laughed. Not because anything was funny, because she couldn't believe it still existed. Grant has been looking for that drive for years. Why? Because some of the original emails were backed up there. We found them. Did you find the recordings? I froze. What recordings? Celeste stared at me. There should be audio files. Owen and I searched that evening. Took almost an hour. Then he found them inside an old folder labeled with meaningless numbers. There were 7 recordings. The first was nearly 19 years old. Grant's voice was younger, but unmistakable. Celeste's voice was there too. They were discussing the loan. Then I heard Grant say my name. If Meredith asks, the account lost money. She doesn't need to know the rest. I stopped breathing. The man I had trusted was discussing how to lie to me as casually as someone discussing the weather. Another recording was worse. Celeste asked, "What about her signature?" Grant replied, "I handled it." She asked what that meant. He refused to explain. Then the final recording changed everything. It was recent. Less than a year old. Grant was angry. Celeste told him she intended to repay what she owed and disclose the history to me. Grant said, "You're not destroying my marriage over something that happened 18 years ago." Celeste replied, "You destroyed it 18 years ago. Meredith just doesn't know yet." I had to stop the recording. Owen closed the laptop. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then my son said quietly, "He used me." I looked at him. "What?" "Every Thursday. He used me as the reason." His face tightened. I thought he barely cared what was happening in my life. "Owen. And you thought he was with me?" "Yes. So every time I complained that he wasn't around, you defended him because you thought he was secretly helping me." I had no answer. Because that was exactly what happened. Grant's lie hadn't only deceived me. It had quietly damaged my relationship with our son. I wanted one final confirmation. Not of the past. Of the present. The following Thursday I behaved normally. At breakfast I asked Grant, "Seeing Owen tonight?" "Yeah." "What are you guys doing?" "Probably dinner." I nodded. 5:30 he changed clothes. 6 he checked his phone. At 6:10 he picked up his keys. This time I stopped him at the door. "Grant." He turned. "Yeah. I talked to Owen today." For the first time something flickered across his face. "What about?" "He said he might be busy tonight." Grant recovered quickly. "He texted me. We worked it out." Another lie. Owen was sitting in his apartment waiting for my call. I smiled. "Have fun." Grant left. I watched his car disappear. Then I called Owen. "He's gone." "I'm ready." "Stay there." "Mom, are you sure?" "Yes." Because that night, Grant would not find Celeste alone. I would be waiting for him. At 6:47, Grant's car pulled into Celeste's driveway. I was sitting in her living room. The folder was on the coffee table. The hard drive sat beside it. Celeste looked terrified. I felt strangely calm. Grant opened the front door with a key. That hurt too. He had a key to my former best friend's house. He stepped inside. Then he saw me. He stopped. No one spoke. His eyes moved from me to Celeste, then to the hard drive. His face lost its color. Meredith. I had imagined this moment all week. I imagined yelling, crying, demanding explanations. Instead, I asked one simple question. How's Owen? Grant closed his eyes. That was the moment the lie finally died. Not when I followed him. Not when I found the documents. Not when I heard the recordings. It died when he realized there was no sentence left that could save it. Meredith, let me explain. You've had almost 2 years of Thursdays to prepare an explanation. He looked at Celeste. Did you give her those files? I almost laughed. Even then, his first concern was evidence. Look at me, I said. He did. You told me you were helping our son. I was trying to protect this family. No. You were protecting yourself. It was an old mistake. Then why did you need a new lie every Thursday? He had no answer. Eventually, Grant sat down. For the next hour, he told me his version. He said the original investment had seemed harmless. He believed he could double the money. He planned to return everything before I noticed. When the investment failed, he panicked. He used the property loan to cover losses. He forged my authorization because he knew I would refuse. Every decision, according to Grant, had been made to fix the decision before it. One lie became another. One hidden account became another. One false signature became another. Then I asked about the Thursdays. He rubbed his hands together. Celeste contacted me after finding the old records. So you told me you were seeing Owen. I needed somewhere believable to be. The sentence was so cold that even Celeste looked away. Somewhere believable? I knew you wouldn't question it. Because our son was struggling. Grant said nothing. You saw your own son hurting and thought, that's useful. No. That is exactly what you did. I never wanted to hurt Owen. But you used him anyway. Grant looked toward the window. I asked, why didn't you tell me when Celeste contacted you? Because I knew what you would think. What would I think? That I had betrayed you. I stared at him. You were afraid I would accurately understand what you had done. I thought the forged signature would hurt most. It didn't. I thought the hidden money would hurt most. It didn't. Even Celeste's silence wasn't the deepest wound. The deepest wound was remembering every Thursday, every forehead kiss, every container of food I packed, every time I told Grant I was proud of him, every time I defended him to Owen, every time I sat alone in our house thinking my husband was somewhere being a better father. He had built his lie out of the qualities I admired in him. That was what I couldn't forgive. I said, do you know what I told people about you? Grant looked confused. I told them what a devoted father you were. Meredith. I admired you. My voice finally broke. You made me admire the lie. That silenced him. Because there was nothing he could say to make that smaller. Grant didn't know Owen was coming. At 8:12, the front door opened. Owen stepped inside. Grant stood immediately. Owen. My son looked at him. I had never seen that expression on his face before. Not rage. Not sadness. Disappointment. Pure disappointment. You told Mom you were with me? Grant moved toward him. Son. Don't. Grant stopped. For almost 2 years? I can explain. I already heard the recordings. Grant looked at me. You brought him into this? Owen answered before I could. You brought me into it. Grant went silent. You used my apartment as your alibi. I was trying to keep this from affecting you. Owen shook his head. You told Mom I was struggling so much that you needed to see me every week. You were struggling. And you weren't there. That sentence hit harder than anything I had said. Owen continued. Do you know how many times I wondered why you didn't call? Grant's face changed. I thought maybe you were disappointed in me. Owen, I wasn't. But Mom kept telling me you cared more than I realized. Now I know why. He pointed toward the hard drive. She thought you were being a father because you told her you were. Grant sat down. For once he looked small. Then Owen turned toward Celeste. And you knew. She nodded. For part of it. You knew he was telling Mom he came here because he was seeing me? Celeste hesitated. Yes. Owen laughed once bitterly. So everybody got to use my life. No, Celeste said. That wasn't what I wanted. But you allowed it. She lowered her head. Yes. I looked at the woman who had once been my closest friend. Why didn't you call me? I was ashamed. For 18 years? Yes. You watched me trust him. Yes. You sat in my home. You ate at my table. You listened to me talk about money problems while you knew where the money had gone. Tears filled her eyes. I know. There are apologies that repair something. And there are apologies that simply confirm the damage. Celeste's belonged to the second kind. I believe she regretted it. That didn't mean I trusted her again. Regret and repair are not the same thing. Part 21, The Decision. Grant came home that night. I did not sleep beside him. The next morning I told him I wanted space. He asked how long. I don't know. Are you ending our marriage? I don't know. He looked terrified. And strangely that made me angry. For almost 20 years he had controlled what I was allowed to know. Now he wanted immediate certainty from me. You don't get an answer today, I told him. Meredith, 29 years has to mean something. It does. I looked at him. That's why this hurts. He started to speak. I stopped him. You keep talking about the length of our marriage as if time cancels betrayal. Doesn't. It makes the betrayal heavier because you had more opportunities to tell the truth. He sat down. What can I do? Start by giving me every financial record. He nodded. Every account. Yes. Every loan. Yes. Every transfer. Yes. And if I find one more thing you intentionally hid, you won't need to ask what I'm deciding. Grant understood. For the first time in years, perhaps decades, the burden of proving something belonged to him. The next several weeks were painful. Grant disclosed 2 accounts I had never known existed. Neither contained a fortune. That almost made it worse. This wasn't some dramatic secret life built around millions of dollars. It was ordinary deception. Small transfers. Hidden decisions. Private arrangements. Money moved because Grant believed he had the right to decide what I needed to know. We hired an independent financial professional to review everything. The original property issue had been resolved years earlier. Our current home was not at risk. But emotionally, none of that mattered. I had spent decades believing our financial mistakes were shared mistakes. They weren't. Some had been Grant's decisions presented to me afterward as bad luck. I thought about all the times I had blamed myself for not saving enough. All the times I worked extra hours. All the things I postponed. The betrayal wasn't just what Grant had done. It was the false version of my own life he had made me live. One evening Owen came over. Grant was staying elsewhere temporarily. Owen and I sat at the kitchen table. After a while he said, "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why did you believe him?" The question wasn't accusing. That made it harder. "Because he was your father." Owen waited. "And because I wanted it to be true." "What?" "That he was showing up for you." I looked down at my hands. "I was worried about you. I thought you were lonely. When your father started those dinners, I felt relieved." Owen nodded. "So the lie gave you something you needed." "Yes." That was the answer. Grant's lie worked because it wasn't designed around my fear. It was designed around my hope. I wanted my husband to be that father. I wanted our family to be that strong. And because the story made me happy, I never inspected it closely. Owen reached across the table. "Mom, I should have told you earlier that Dad wasn't coming around." "No. I knew you thought we were closer than we were. You didn't know why." He nodded. Then he asked, "Do you think you'll forgive him?" I thought about it. I think forgiveness and staying married are 2 different decisions. Owen looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, "That makes sense." The first Thursday after Grant moved out felt strange. At 5:30 I looked at the clock. At 6 I found myself listening for footsteps upstairs. At 6:10 the house remained silent. For almost 2 years that minute had meant something. Grant leaving. Me trusting. A kiss on the forehead. A sentence about our son. Now there was nothing. At 6:20 my doorbell rang. It was Owen. He held 2 paperbacks. "What are you doing here?" He shrugged. "It's Thursday." I almost cried. He came inside. We ate dinner at the kitchen table. Not because he needed rescuing. Not because I needed proof that we were a family. Just because we wanted to spend time together. At one point Owen smiled. "You know what's weird?" "What?" "I think this might be the first real Thursday dinner." I looked at him. Then I smiled too. "I think you're right." Grant asked to meet me several weeks later. We sat in a quiet restaurant. He looked tired. He had lost weight. "I've been thinking about what you said," he told me. "Which part?" "That I made you admire the lie." I said nothing. "I think that's the part I'm most ashamed of." I looked at him carefully. "Why?" "Because I knew exactly what I was doing." It was the first time he said that. No excuses. No panic. No claim that he was protecting us. I knew if I said I was helping Owen, you wouldn't ask questions. My throat tightened. Grant continued. "And every time you told me you were proud of me, I should have stopped." "Yes." "I didn't." "No. I liked that you saw me that way." There it was. The ugliest truth. The lie hadn't merely protected him. It had rewarded him. He got to hide his past while receiving admiration for being a devoted father. "I'm sorry," he said. I believed he meant it. But believing someone regrets hurting you is not the same as believing they are safe to trust again. A month later, Celeste mailed me an envelope. Inside was a letter and copies of every remaining document she possessed. She wrote that she was completing the repayments and transferring the portion owed to Evelyn directly. She also wrote something I didn't expect. She said Grant had asked her several times over the years whether she thought he should tell me. Each time, Celeste told him to wait until the financial damage was repaired. That meant she wasn't simply a frightened participant. She had helped preserve the lie. At the bottom of the letter, she wrote, "I kept telling myself that silence was preventing pain. I understand now that I was only postponing the moment when the pain belonged to the person who deserved the truth." I read the sentence several times. Then I put the letter away. I didn't call her. Some relationships don't end with screaming. Sometimes they end when you finally understand what the other person was capable of hiding while looking directly at you. 6 months passed. Grant and I remained separated. We met occasionally. We talked more honestly than we had in years. Ironically, losing my trust finally made him stop trying to manage what I thought of him. He admitted things without being asked. He answered uncomfortable questions. He stopped defending the indefensible. Was that enough to save our marriage? I still didn't know. People wanted an answer. Friends asked whether I was taking him back. Owen carefully avoided asking. But life isn't always divided into leaving and staying. Sometimes there is a long space between those choices where you learn who someone really is without immediately deciding what they will be to you next. Grant had spent years controlling the story. I refused to let him control the ending too. Something unexpected happened after the truth came out. Owen and I became closer. Not because we bonded over anger toward Grant. I refused to make our son responsible for my marriage. Instead, we finally started talking honestly. Owen admitted that after his engagement ended, he had felt ashamed. He believed Grant viewed him as a failure. That was why he pulled away. I told him I had mistaken distance for independence. I thought giving you space was respectful. Sometimes it was. And sometimes I wanted you to call again. That hurt. But unlike Grant, Owen gave me the truth while I could still do something with it. So I changed. I called. I visited. I listened without trying to solve everything. And every few Thursdays Owen came for dinner. No schedule. No performance. No lie. Almost a year after that afternoon in the coffee shop, Grant asked whether he could come home. Not permanently. Just for dinner. It happened to be Thursday. I almost said no because of the day. Then I realized I didn't want Thursdays to belong to his deception forever. So I agreed. Owen came too. The 3 of us sat around the same table where Grant and I had eaten thousands of meals during our marriage. It was awkward. Nobody pretended otherwise. Eventually, Owen asked his father about work. Grant answered. They talked. Not deeply. Not perfectly. But honestly. After dinner, Owen left. Grant helped me clear the dishes. Then he stood near the door. "Thank you." For what? For letting me be here. I looked at him. A year ago, you would have walked out this door and told me you were going to Owen's. He nodded. I know. And I would have believed you. I know. I waited. Do you understand that I missed that version of myself? Grant looked confused. The version who trusted you without thinking. His eyes lowered. Yes. That's what your lie took from me. Not just money. Not just friendship. Not just certainty about my marriage. It took away the ease of believing someone I loved. Grant whispered. I'm sorry. This time I didn't tell him whether I forgave him. Some apologies deserve to be heard without being rewarded with immediate absolution. I used to believe betrayal announced itself through obvious changes. Distance. Anger. Secret phone calls. Unexplained absences. But Grant taught me something far more unsettling. Sometimes betrayal hides inside the behavior you admire most. Every Thursday I watched my husband leave our home and thought I was witnessing loyalty. I thought I was watching a father refuse to abandon his son during the hardest period of his life. I thought those evenings proved I had chosen a dependable man. The truth was almost the exact opposite. Grant had taken our son's pain and turned it into an alibi. He had taken my love for Owen and turned it into protection for himself. And he had taken my admiration and used it to make sure I never asked the questions that might expose him. That was the betrayal I struggled with most. Not that my husband had lied, but that he understood me well enough to know exactly which lie I would want to believe. Today, Thursdays mean something different. Sometimes I spend them alone. Sometimes Owen comes over. Sometimes Grant and I meet as we continue deciding what, if anything, can be rebuilt. There are no automatic promises anymore. No stories accepted simply because they sound comforting. Trust, I learned, isn't the absence of questions. Real trust survives questions. And love should never require one person to live inside a version of reality created by the other. I still think about that afternoon with Owen. The coffee between us. The confused look on his face. The moment I thanked him for giving his father something meaningful to look forward to. And his answer. What Thursday dinners? 5 ordinary words. That was all it took. 29 years of certainty cracked open in 5 words. But those words also gave me something Grant had denied me for years. The chance to see my own life clearly. Because sometimes the most painful truth isn't discovering that someone you love has been lying. It's discovering that the lie worked because it was built from everything you loved most about them. And once I understood that, I stopped asking whether I could return to the marriage I thought I had. That marriage existed only because I didn't know the whole story. The question now was whether Grant and I could build something different from the truth. Something smaller, perhaps. Something less perfect. But something real. And for the first time in years, I was no longer letting anyone else decide what I was allowed to know before I made that choice.